Why is my
Do you know
mother's
who that
picture in your
is?
mansion? Cried the black girl.
Is that your mother?
The billionaire couldn't believe his eyes. When a young black scholarship
You know who
student
that is?
visits a billionaire's mansion, she's
Is that your
shocked to
mother?
find her late mother's photo hanging on his wall. What she discovers next will uncover a 20-year-old secret, one that could change both of their lives forever. The sun dipped low behind the Los Angeles hills, painting the sky in soft streaks of orange and pink as Ava Johnson stepped out of the taxi. Her shoes crunched against the white gravel driveway that led to the Whitmore mansion, a sprawling estate that looked more like a museum than a home. The mansion's tall glass windows reflected the setting sun, and marble lion statues guarded the enormous wooden doors. Ava adjusted her blazer nervously, clutching the scholarship folder to her chest. This was her one shot, a chance to study architecture at Whitmore Academy, funded by one of the richest men in the country, Richard Whitmore himself. Her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and anxiety. She had grown up hearing about men like him, untouchable, powerful, and so far removed from people like her that they might as well have lived on another planet. Translate to Urdu. The butler opened the door with a polite nod. "Miss Johnson? Mr. Whitmore is expecting you." As she stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive perfume. Every wall was covered with paintings, grand portraits of stern men in suits, women in pearls, and landscapes that seemed to stretch forever. She could see her reflection in the glossy floors beneath her feet. Ava followed the butler through the long corridor, her eyes darting from one artwork to another. Every detail screamed wealth: gold frames, silk drapes, chandeliers that could light a ballroom. She thought of her tiny apartment back home, with peeling paint and flickering bulbs. This world didn't belong to her. Then something caught her eye. A single photograph stood apart from the rest, placed carefully on a side table near a window. Unlike the grand oil paintings, this was a simple framed picture, an old photo of a young black woman holding a baby and smiling warmly at the camera. The light from the window fell softly across her face, making the photo seem alive. Ava froze mid-step. Her throat tightened. She knew that smile. She knew those eyes. It couldn't be. Her pulse began to race, the sound of her heartbeat loud in her ears. She moved closer, her hand trembling as she reached out toward the frame. The woman in the picture was wearing the same necklace Ava kept in her drawer at home, the silver one her mother had always worn. Her breath caught in her chest. The room seemed to blur. "Excuse me," she whispered to the butler, her voice shaking. Who is this woman?" The butler turned, surprised by her tone. "Oh, that photo. That's been there for as long as I can remember. Mr. Whitmore never talks about it." Ava's hand fell to her side. Confusion and disbelief swirled inside her like a storm. What was her mother's photo doing here, inside the mansion of one of the richest men in America? Ava stood frozen in place, her eyes locked on the photo as a chill ran through her body. The world around her faded, the polished marble floor, the expensive paintings, the faint classical music echoing from another room. All she could see was that familiar face smiling back at her. Her mother, Grace Johnson. Her mind spun wildly. It had to be some mistake. Maybe someone who just looked like her. But no. That gentle smile, those almond-shaped eyes, the small scar on her mother's chin from when she slipped on the kitchen tiles years ago. It was all there. "Perfectly painfully clear." Her voice cracked as she turned to the butler again. "You're sure you don't know who she is? Where this came from?" "I'm afraid I don't, miss," he replied politely. "But Mr. Whitmore values that photo very much. He insists it never be moved or cleaned by anyone but himself." That made Ava's stomach twist. Why would a billionaire, a man she had never met before, treasure a photo of her mother like that? Before she could ask more, the heavy oak door at the end of the hallway opened, and Richard Whitmore stepped out. Tall, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed in a navy suit, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who always got what he wanted. His voice was calm but commanding. "Miss Johnson," he said, walking toward her with a warm smile. "You made it. Please come in. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Ava blinked, snapping back to the present. She tried to gather herself, but her hands were shaking. Her throat felt dry. She wanted to ask about the scholarship, about her studies, on anything normal, but the photo behind her pulled at her every thought like a magnet. Richard extended his hand. "You must be nervous." "Don't be. This isn't just an interview. It's a conversation." Ava forced a polite smile and shook his hand. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity." As they stepped into his massive study, her gaze flickered once more to the photo behind her. The woman's face seemed to follow her, as if watching, waiting. Richard gestured for her to sit. "You remind me of someone," he said suddenly, his eyes studying her face. "I can't quite place it." Ava froze mid-motion. Her heart thudded painfully. "Someone you knew?" she asked carefully. He nodded slowly. "Yes, a long time ago." His expression softened, almost wistful. "Someone I never forgot." The words hit her like a thunderclap. Ava couldn't take it anymore. The questions, the confusion, the ache in her chest, it all came pouring out. Her voice trembled. "Why?" She hesitated, trying to steady her breath. "Why is my mother's photo in your mansion?" Richard's smile faltered. His hand froze mid-gesture. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then, very slowly, he turned toward the hallway, toward the photo she was talking about. His eyes widened, color draining from his face. "You're what?" he whispered. Ava stood, her voice stronger now, though her heart raced. "My mother. Grace Johnson. That's her in that picture. Why do you have it?" Richard's mouth opened, but no words came out. He sank into his chair, staring at the floor like a man haunted by ghosts. Finally, he looked up at her. And in his eyes, she saw something she didn't expect. Not surprise, not confusion. It was guilt. Richard sat there for a long moment, his face pale, eyes unfocused, as though the world around him had vanished. The question hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. He leaned back slowly, the leather of his chair creaking, and pressed his trembling fingers to his temples. "Grace Johnson," he repeated softly, almost to himself. "I haven't heard that name in over 20 years. Ava's chest tightened. "So you do know her?" He looked up at her then, and in that single glance, she saw something she didn't expect. Pain, regret, and a sadness that seemed to have been buried deep for decades. "Yes," he whispered. "I knew her. Better than anyone." Ava's throat went dry. "How?" she asked quietly. "How did you know my mother?" Richard rose from his chair, walked to the window, and stared out at the endless garden beyond the glass. The sun was setting, and golden light spilled across his face. "She worked here," he said finally. "This very house. She was my personal assistant, though truthfully she was much more than that. She was my closest friend." Ava's eyebrows furrowed. "My mother never told me she worked for a billionaire." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I imagine she wouldn't have. Grace was a proud woman, kind, strong, and far too good for this place." His voice softened as memories flickered in his eyes. "She brought light into this house. Back then I was younger, hungry for power, chasing deals, money, reputation. Everyone around me only cared about what I could give them. But Grace," he paused, his voice trembling, "she cared about who I was." Ava clenched her fists, her heart pounding. "Then why didn't you help her?" "We lost everything after she left this city. She worked herself to death trying to take care of me." Richard turned sharply, guilt flashing across his face. "I tried to find her," he said, his voice cracking. "When she left, it was without warning. No goodbye. No message. Just gone. I searched for months. I even hired investigators, but she vanished. It was as if she never existed." Ava shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "She was alive. We were in Chicago. She never mentioned you. Not once." He stared at her, the weight of 2 lost decades heavy between them. "Maybe she didn't want to," he said quietly. "I gave her reasons to leave. Things were complicated back then. I was engaged, surrounded by people who didn't approve of my friendship with her. She got caught in the middle of scandals and lies that weren't her fault." He turned toward the photo again, his voice breaking. "The night before she left, she came into this room. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Richard, sometimes love and loyalty can't survive the world we live in." Then she was gone. Ava's tears slipped down her cheeks. "You loved her?" He nodded, his eyes glistening. "Yes," he whispered. "And I never told her." The silence that followed was suffocating. The ticking of the clock seemed to echo in the vast room. Ava took a deep breath, her anger fighting with sympathy. "You had everything, money, power, people who could find her, and still you let her disappear." Richard closed his eyes. "I was a coward. I thought she'd come back when she was ready. By the time I realized she wasn't going to, it was too late." Ava turned away, wiping her tears. "You don't know what she went through. The nights she skipped dinner so I could eat. The way she cried when rent was due. The pain
Richard's
of knowing
hands
she gave
trembled
everything and no
slightly
one
as he knelt
cared.
in front of the
Richard's
hidden
voice
safe,
broke as
his
he
movement
said,
slow
"I
and
cared,
deliberate.
Ava, more than
The
you
faint
can." The click
can.
of the lock echoed in the quiet room, followed by a soft metallic sound as the door swung open. Inside were a few old documents, a velvet jewelry box, and a single, folded letter, its edges yellowed with age, the paper delicate from years of being handled. He reached for it carefully, as though it might fall apart in his hands. "This," he said softly, "was the last thing your mother left behind." Ava stepped closer, her breath catching in her throat. She had no idea what to expect. A contract, a confession, maybe proof of something terrible. But the way Richard looked at the letter, she could tell it meant far more. He held it out to her with trembling fingers. "I've kept this for over 20 years, he whispered. "I could never bring myself to open it again after she left." "But it's time." Ava hesitated before taking it. The paper felt fragile, almost sacred between her fingers. She slowly unfolded it, her hands shaking. The handwriting was instantly familiar, looping, elegant, and warm. "Her mother's." "Richard," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone. Please don't try to find me. The world you live in isn't meant for someone like me, or my daughter. You've been kind, but your kindness has a cost, and I can't pay it anymore. There are people who don't want us near you. For her safety, I have to disappear. Take care of yourself and never forget to live for something real." By the time Ava reached the last line, tears blurred her vision. She pressed her hand to her mouth, a soft sob escaping. "She left. Because of you," she said, voice breaking. "Because your world wasn't safe for her." Richard's eyes glistened as he turned away, guilt carving deep lines into his face. "Yes," he admitted. "There were threats. People in my circle, business rivals, my fiancé's family, they hated that Grace worked so closely with me. They called her names, said she was after my money. When someone left a threatening note on her car, she refused to tell me who did it. She just disappeared." Ava's body trembled. "She never told me that," she whispered. "All she said was that we had to move, that we couldn't stay in California anymore." Richard nodded slowly. "She saved my life once, Ava. There was an accident at the construction site. I was trapped under a collapsed beam. Grace ran into the fire to pull me out. She risked everything. That's the kind of person she was." He walked to the window again, his voice barely audible. "After she left, I searched for years. I even visited her old neighborhood, but no one knew where she went. Eventually, I stopped trying, but I never forgot. That's why I kept her photo there. It was the only piece of her I had left." Ava sank into a chair, the weight of her mother's letter pressing down on her chest. "All this time, I thought we were alone," she said softly. "I thought no one ever cared about her." Richard turned toward her, his eyes full of grief. "She was the best person I ever knew, and I let her walk away because I didn't have the courage to protect her. I thought money could fix everything, but Grace, she knew better." He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "You remind me of her, Ava, the way you stand up for yourself, the way you don't let fear silence you. It's like seeing her again." Ava looked up at him, her vision blurred with tears. "Then why are you telling me this now?" "Because you deserve the truth," he said quietly. "And because you need to know what she meant to me. She wasn't just someone who worked for me. She was the heart of this house." Ava looked down at the letter again, her mother's handwriting glowing softly under the lamplight. She could almost hear her mother's voice whispering between the lines. She protected me from your world, Ava said, her voice trembling. But maybe she also protected you, from yourself. Richard nodded slowly, his voice a whisper. You might be right. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fireplace and the faint rustle of the letter in Ava's hands. Finally, she folded it carefully and held it to her chest. You said you wanted to make things right, she said softly. Then prove it. Richard looked at her, his expression solemn but resolute. I intend to. He reached into the safe once more and pulled out a second envelope, sealed with wax. Your mother left something else. For you. Ava's breath hitched as he placed it gently in her hands. Her mother's name was written across the front, and beneath it, in fading ink, 2 words that made her heart stop. For my daughter. Ava held the second envelope in her trembling hands, staring at her mother's handwriting as if it were a ghost come to life. Her breath hitched, and for a long moment she couldn't bring herself to open it. The weight of 20 years pressed against her chest. Questions, memories, loss, and now, the fragile truth she had never expected to find inside this mansion. Richard stood a few feet away, silent, his hands folded in front of him. The flickering firelight danced across his face, softening the lines of age and guilt. Take your time, he said quietly. She wrote that for you. Ava finally slid her finger under the wax seal and unfolded the note with delicate care. The faint scent of lavender drifted up, the same perfume her mother used to wear. Her eyes filled instantly. My dearest Ava, the letter began, if you are reading this, it means you have found the place I hoped you never would. By now you've learned parts of the truth. Richard is a good man, though he's made mistakes. Don't hate him for mine. I chose to walk away to protect you, not because I stopped caring. One day you'll understand that love is sometimes about leaving, not staying. Tears rolled freely down Ava's cheeks as she read each line. I wanted you to have more than I ever did. I wanted you to see the world, build something beautiful, and live without fear. Don't let the past chain you, my love. Let it guide you. And if you ever find Richard again, tell him. I forgive him. Ava pressed the letter to her heart, sobbing quietly. It felt like her mother was right there. Her voice soft, her warmth close, her forgiveness echoing through the empty spaces of the mansion. When she finally looked up, Richard's eyes were wet too. He turned toward the window, blinking hard. She forgave me, he murmured, as if the words themselves were a miracle. After everything, she still forgave me? Ava wiped her tears. That's who she was, she said softly. She carried forgiveness like other people carry armor. Richard nodded slowly, then walked to his desk. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder bound with a golden ribbon. I can't bring her back, he said, his voice steadier now. But I can keep my promise to her. I established the Grace Johnson Scholarship Fund in her name, something I should have done years ago. It will support young women in architecture, starting with you. Ava looked at him, stunned. You're giving this to me? He smiled faintly. Not giving. Restoring what was always yours. She opened the folder. Inside was the scholarship paperwork and another document, a property deed. Her eyes widened as she read the address. It was their old home in Chicago, restored, paid in full. Her voice broke. You rebuilt it? Richard nodded. I bought it after I found out she'd passed. It took years to restore, but I kept it waiting, just in case. The words hit her harder than she expected. All those nights her mother had cried over bills, the winters when the heat barely worked, the constant fear of losing their home. And now here it was, back in her hands. Ava swallowed hard, looking up at the man who once broke her mother's heart. You're not doing this because you feel guilty, are you? Richard met her gaze, his expression calm but sincere. No, he said softly. I'm doing it because your mother taught me what real love is, and I want to honor that. Ava took a slow breath, folding her mother's letter and tucking it safely into her bag. The air between them felt lighter now, though still heavy with memory. Thank you, she whispered. Richard smiled faintly. No, Ava, thank you. You brought her back to me, even if only for a moment. They stepped out into the garden together, where the last rays of sunset brushed the sky in shades of gold and rose. The rose bushes swayed gently in the evening breeze, the same ones Grace had planted decades ago. Ava knelt and touched one of the blossoms, its petals soft beneath her fingers. She loved these, Richard said quietly behind her. Said they reminded her that beauty could bloom even in broken soil. Ava smiled through her tears. She used to tell me the same thing. For a while, they stood there in silence, two souls bound by grief, forgiveness, and the memory of a woman who had changed them both. The light faded slowly, and as Ava turned to leave, she looked back at the mansion one last time. Through the tall window, she could see the photograph of her mother glowing faintly in the twilight. The same gentle smile, forever frozen in time. Watching over them, Ava whispered under her breath, "We're home now, Mom." And for the first time in years, her heart felt light, like her mother's spirit had finally found peace, right where it had always belonged.